supposed to see ourselves?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay. All right, so I am going to assume that we are live and getting things popping. What's up, everybody? Welcome to A Digital World. Today, we will be having a discussion with the Politicking co-founders, Jordan and Wen-kuni. I am Bree Harmon. Welcome to our wonderful event. And before we get started, I have to shout out my shirt. Y'all can't see it, but I'm gonna show you anyway. Rattlers all day, baby. Rattlers all day. I'm just kidding. We got some Howard grads in here, so I'm gonna go ahead and let them shout out Howard. Hey, Howard girls. Hey, Howard grads.
HU. It's all love. It's all love, though. I think we can have both fam and Howard solidarity. So
yes, we can. We can. Hey, it's all about like this event, HBCU, uniting us all together. So, I mean, I don't even want to talk long about myself. This is all about you guys, all about politicking. But before we get started, I want to know, Jordan, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself, my love.
Sure. So I'm Jordan Wilson, one of the co-founders of Politicking. I went to Howard, as we just said, in which, you know, the experience was really a culmination of my upbringing in politics and public service. My parents had long been engaged in politics from the aspect of working with folks in my hometown of Gary, Indiana, to just figure out, you know, how we could become more autonomous, civically engaged Black people. Who would know, and we'll talk about this well into the interview, that politicking would be a part of me adding to that legacy, of course, incorporating tech into getting Black people more involved. I'm currently a 2L at Boston College Law School. Obviously, I think that there's some real synergy with law and tech and media when it comes to involving Black people. And I'm also involved a lot in civic academia. So I'm currently a public service scholar at Harvard College, but this is all a part of my civic engagement world, right? Ultimately, I would say in one word, my goal and idea is to empower people through information as it pertains particularly to civic engagement. Obviously, Wen-kuni and I are working on this through politicking, but overall, we really, and I really especially look to work on this in a ton of different aspects and mediums.
I love it. What a beautiful resume and a history behind it. Wen-kuni, hello, my dear.
How you doing, Bree? Thank you for having us.
Yes. Welcome.
I'm super excited to be here and to echo some of Jordan's sentiments and introduce myself. My name is Wen-kuni Ceant. I'm also a Florida girl, as we spoke about. So definitely love between the Bison and the Rattlers here. We welcome both to the platform. And so, you know, Politicking is a social political mobile application that Jordan and I created. The idea kind of came in 2016, the last time we had such a pivotal election, and we're right on the precipice of another pivotal election. And so I think this conversation that we're going to have this evening is timely. I actually had a little bit of a different path than Jordan. Like, my background was actually not necessarily civically oriented. And that's kind of what brought me to politicking, because I left the polling precincts feeling, you know, disengaged and kind of disappointed in myself for not knowing enough about politics. And I think that's a sentiment that so many Americans share, but particularly people that look like you and I. And so I really realized that we have to be the change that we want to see in the community. And the way that we wanted to do that was through providing a resource that no longer did people have to feel, you know, embarrassed or disengaged from the political conversation. We wanted to make sure that they understood that there is a place for you within politics, especially Black and Brown people. So that's what really caused Jordan and I to create the app. We saw something missing and we decided to fix a problem that was already existing.
And I think you touched on it very well. That is a big problem. A lot of the times we don't know. We're disengaged. We don't understand what's happening. And some of us do. And it's kind of one of those things where this is an app, like you said, that is going to give us that information. That's going to help us. That's going to navigate us through so much, because politics is a conversation that, You can start one way and end in a fight or in an argument, or it can get very sticky. And if you're not educated well enough to have the conversation, you kind of feel left out. So, I mean, you started a little bit. I want to get into 2016 where this all began. Tell me from the beginning, whoever wants to take the floor, about politicking and where it started.
Yeah, so 2016, I remember, I'm from Miramar, Florida, and I walked into this polling precinct and I was looking at my ballot, and, I had gotten my undergraduate degree, my master's degree. And so I felt that I was supposed to know the information right on the ballot. And so when I started seeing names that I didn't know, when I started realizing I didn't have a firm command on the amendments and referendums, I started getting a little embarrassed, and I didn't know who to talk to. And so I talked to Jordan because we were really good friends. We were sorority sisters. And so I was, lamenting to her, really. I was like, I feel like there should be something out there that's helpful, that helps us address this lack of information in the political field. And we both kind of were like, scratching our heads about it. And we're like, well, if one doesn't exist, why don't we create one? And it was really born out of those conversations.
It was born out of utility. And just to crystallize that, the why was, I was just like, why wouldn't we create an app that does that? We have an app for everything else. We have an app to order food. We have an app to get transportation. But how in the world we don't have an app to exercise one of the most important rights that we're supposed to have? I think it's important to note. Yeah, they don't want us to. And it's important to note that not many people have the right, actually, formerly convicted felons, immigrants, voting is something that those of us who have the privilege and the right of doing should participate in. But it's much as Wen-kuni was feeling disappointed and disenfranchised, she was one of millions. And even I was, having all the experience that I did not know everybody at the bottom of the ballot. And these are people from my community, perhaps people that I would have even met, but I didn't know who was asking for my vote and to make the decisions that impacted the lives of myself and my family. And so with us acting on the idea that we had to create a resource that was accessible, we also had to take a look back at that very day, right? The presidential election of 2016 was probably a day most of us would never forget. And for us, I really was lamenting on the fact that I had talked to a lot of people who didn't understand their why. I don't think that changed even after the 2016 election. As much as people were upset or maybe people were excited, people still didn't really understand why they would go in to vote the next year. People might not have even felt as compelled. And so we decided to ensure that everyone had a tool that would actually allow them to understand who and what was on the ballot, because the fact that Wen-kuni or even myself didn't know certainly wasn't a me problem. It really obviously was a me problem, we problem.
Yeah. So I know you guys are nonpartisan. Tell me, what was the reason behind that? I know there's some backlash. I looked at a couple of conversations that you guys have had recently, and you're getting that backlash about you guys being nonpartisan and how important it is to encourage people to say, you don't have to pick a side right now. Just learn, just understand, just know more, and then decide where you want to go. Tell me about some of that experience with being a nonpartisan, app.
I love how you mentioned backlash too. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, Brianna, it's tough. It's a struggle. I'm not gonna lie to you. I think Jordan will echo my sentiments in saying it is tough. The decision that we made to be nonpartisan was something that we had to decide very early on, right? Because when people see us as the co-founders of this entity, they already make their assumptions automatically about who we are and what we stand for. And that's just simply untrue. The thoughts behind that is that people kind of push Black people into a box and give us this monolithic identity. And that's just simply untrue. And so one of the ways that we resist that is making politicking nonpartisan, because we know that there are Black people that are Democrats and Republican and third party, and it's okay for you to believe some things socially and some things fiscally, and that's all right. There's no one way to be a Black person in this country. And we really wanted for people to understand that with politicking. And there's no way to be a Black or brown person in this country. You know what I mean? There's so many nuances attached. I'm a Caribbean American. I have so many nuances even within my own culture as a Haitian American. And so I would hate for someone to impress their particular views on me just because of how I look. And so with politicking, we want it to be the resource that cuts through that partisan fray. We see a lot of huge newscasts, like CNN or Fox News of the world. They're obviously left and right leaning. With politics, we want it to be something where people could meet in the middle, have positive discourse, and walk away thinking something a little bit different than they walked into the conversation.
And let's be clear, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, I'm not taking a shot at them. That's certainly not our goal, but those are not those people's channels. Politicking is the people's platform. They often have agendas and they often have stories that are sort of articulated to prove a point. That's not our issue. The only thing that we want to do is get across what and who is on the ballot. Again, we started the platform because we didn't benefit as much from CNN or MSNBC or Fox from understanding what was happening locally and at the state level. Another thing is that they couldn't possibly be because a third of voters in the 2020 election identify as independent already. So if so many people who are not leaning towards a particular party are showing up to vote, there's clearly a disconnect with the platforms that are more prominent nowadays. And so what we want to do and what we are doing, and really what the revolutionizing edge of politicking is the fact that we're presenting the information. There are no strings attached. We don't have anything to gain from particularly leaning one way or the other. The only time that we have something to gain is when people go into the next election after using politicking more empowered than they did before, because they understand their why. I'm here to vote for better schools in my community. I'm here to vote for DACA. I'm here to vote against certain things that are happening to people that a particular candidate or a group of candidates don't stand against. That's the stuff that we really need to cut through and really have access to. And politicking is the only place that folks can really access that type of information, and certainly the depth of that information.
Say it again, the only place, because like you said, you heard it, the only place. But that's true though, because a lot of the times you're looking at these websites, you're looking at these stories that are being presented, and it's not giving you information or true facts. It's giving you what they want to give you. It's giving you, choose this side. This is the information we want you to hear so that we can push you and persuade you this way. Instead of saying, here's both. I mean, here's one side, here's the other. You tell me what you want to do with it, but I'm going to feed you the information so you at least know. So tell me, let's go personal. Let's go a little personal with you, Jordan. What exactly, I don't want you to tell me exactly your political party, but tell me, where are you leaning as far as when you're looking at this election right now?
I'm leaning for COVID recovery. I'm leaning for better schools and education. I make a joke with Wen-kuni and my team a lot, but a part of my hustles are about to be being a broadband lobbyist, because spending time at home, I'm in Gary, Indiana just for a couple of weeks, and to vote, I realized that broadband Wi-Fi and access to it is something that poor Black communities lack. That's a problem. Kids are in school right now. I'm for those issues. I don't care who the candidate is that will actually represent those things. That's where my heart is when I'm walking into the polls on Tuesday. And that's what I encourage other people to do. If you look at, and this is the unfortunate truth, I won't go down the political science rabbit hole and certainly not the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, but if you look at politics as we know it in this country, it's often the same sort of players or folks within the same type of groups that keep battling against each other every year. So at the national landscape, at even the state and local landscape, that's the case. And so how about we distance ourselves from like essentially gangs battling each other, you know, getting caught up in the parties, getting caught up in this crew against the other. I'm tired of that. I'm not interested in it. I think that's whack, but I will give credence and take an ear or give an ear to the issues that matter. And so I would even kind of bring something that Wen-kuni brought up. I'm also for referendums that make a difference in my community. When I vote next Tuesday, I'll be voting yes or no on a referendum that'll essentially improve our schools through a budgetary mechanism. This is stuff that we want people to know. You know, pay less attention to what you see on Twitter, who you see kind of going back and forth. That's ridiculous. And quite frankly, that's irrelevant because we don't get the issues and actual policy proposals out of that. pay attention to what people have done and what they say they will do. Pay attention to plans. So that's really what I'm interested in. You're right. I won't get into party because I'll be honest with you. I am, registered with a particular party, but I'm less interested in that as a voter as I was perhaps, as a first time voter or anything. I'm more so interested in what sort of results I'll get out of a person after Tuesday.
I love that. Wen-kuni, how about yourself?
I'm going to echo a lot of Jordan's sentiments. Like, we have to get away from this partisan gang mentality. I think oftentimes it allows these political parties to do whatever they want without one key word, which is accountability. A lot of the times people don't understand that after November 3rd, that's really when the hard work begins, because that's when you have to hold them accountable for the things that they ran on. If they said that they were going to give you X, Y, and Z within the community, it's your job to see to it that those promises are delivered. And if not, then it's your job to vote them out the next opportunity that you get. And so for me, as a child of immigrants, I'm always interested in immigrant rights. I'm interested in DACA. I'm interested in healthcare. I mean, like Jordan said, COVID recovery. I want to make sure that I'm
the
here
real
for
thing.
the next election. Yeah, we are Black and brown people, and we know that this epidemic is disproportionately affecting us. And I always say that we're in the midst of two epidemics. We're in the midst of a COVID-19 epidemic, and we're in the midst of a racial inequality epidemic that's been raging for years in this country. And so I'm voting for both of those things. I think that it's important that we choose a candidate that's going to ensure that we're leading our way out of this very perilous time that we're seeing in the United States. And I'm also interested in finding a candidate that cares about foreign affairs in the lens that I see it, because oftentimes I haven't heard either of the candidates talk about what's going on in Nigeria, the SARS issue there. Yes. As a Black person, we cannot say Black Lives Matter without taking into account Nigerian lives and Haitian lives and Puerto Rican lives. Exactly. These are things that are important to me. And I haven't heard a lot of people talk about them. And it's concerning. It's deeply concerning. And so I want to make sure that A, we're voting for people that are going to see us out of the storm, but B, whoever's put into office, that we're holding them accountable for what they ran on.
Now, I definitely want to go ahead.
I was just going to add one thing. And I mean, we don't have a candidate at the presidential level, obviously at the vice presidential level, but as Black women, we don't have a candidate within our demographic or identity. But I am for either out of the two of them, especially, and even at the state level for those offices, I don't have the privilege of kind of judging someone from their ethnic or racial standpoint. I'm for someone who's going to be a little bit more than somebody who cares about Black lives on Twitter or on Facebook, right? Because I think what a lot of it too, when Kuni's point about accountability, candidates are not stepping up and acting on is the fact that white silence is actually violence. It's everything that we're experiencing. So I'm for someone who will be serious about acting on the fact that they think Black lives matter.
For sure, because it's a lot of, I support it, I'm with the Black lives, but do you really? What are you really saying now to help us? What are you really trying to put in place now to help us? Nothing, but just jump on the bandwagon. Sadly, it's a bandwagon, but jump on the bandwagon of what's happening right now, what's hot right now, and then you're gone. But I do want to definitely get more into politics, and I see a lot of questions coming on. So I'll go ahead. I'm going to take one question from here, and then we'll get back to politicking just so we can kind of balance back and forth because we are getting some good questions. So we have Jason. Where do you think millennials can go to get a deeper understanding of this political parties so they can be more informed when voting in or aligning with a party?
Politicking, first of all, Jason. But second of all, each of these political parties have websites. They have platforms. I urge you to figure out, A, what your own political ideology is, right? So let's say you're for being able to have guns, etc. You go on their site and you see where they align on gun ownership or where they don't align. And then you figure out, okay, maybe it doesn't work on this, but 3 out of 5 of my principles, they align with me on. So maybe I decide to vote this way. It's all about a gamble, right? Not any political party is going to have every single thing that you want or need. It's like finding a partner. one person's not going to have everything that you desire, but maybe they hit 75 to 80. I'm hoping for 95, but maybe that's optimistic. But you need to have someone that's meeting most of the things that are important to you, fundamentally important. And this is not the shallow, superficial stuff. Do they care about, immigration? Do they care about, the criminal justice system as we know it? What are their core principles? I urge you to go to each of their websites, and not just the Democratic and Republican Party. Go to the Green Party website. Go to the Working Families Party website. There are more parties than just the Democratic and Republican Party. And it's okay to familiarize yourself. You might be a libertarian. You will never know if you don't know what a libertarian is and you haven't done the research fundamentally. It's okay to color outside the lines. And that's what we're promoting with politicking. You don't have to identify with something just because of how you look.
I would add also, and it's funny that you brought up the Libertarian Party in Indiana. There's a historic gubernatorial election happening, the potential with us electing our first Black governor ever in the state. But there's also a Libertarian candidate who's pulling a bit more leverage than people anticipated. I think, to your point, it's because people recognize we don't have two choices. But I would also implore you to look as to their principles and plans, obviously, but what have they done? Like, what are these principles based off of? A lot of parties and candidates are telling us they're going to draw the stars in a way that we like and make sure that, whatever occurs. But it's really hard for me a lot of times to believe candidates and parties when they say that if I haven't particularly seen the party embrace that particular stance or idea before. So, of course, pay attention to what their outline proposals are, what their policies are, but you really have to give credence to what they've actually done.
So I'm definitely going to ask another one of these questions. But before we get to that, let's get back to politicking really quick. So what makes politicking so special for this election? What's going to be so helpful about politicking, the app, using it for this specific election and moving forward with others?
Like, as I mentioned, Brianna, politicking is the only political information platform that in a nonpartisan way speaks to traditionally disconnected and disenfranchised voters. I think a lot of the outlets and publications, and I'll stop calling them out by name, but speak to this very mainstream standard idea of, the white American voter. That's not who is going to show up as the majority of voters this particular election and in subsequent cycles. In fact, the 2020 election year is the year in which minorities are growing to increasingly become dominant in the landscape. And so we're the only platform that actually provides information in a comprehensive way and recognizes that. We're not interested in covering issues as mainstream and then perhaps presenting Black issues. Let's talk about criminal justice reform. No, Black issues are American issues. Politicking captures that. And we are the only place someone can go to and, again, not have to worry about an agenda, not have to worry about fact checking. That's something that we do and we utilize and take very seriously. They're able to really lean on us as a resource to ensure they're well versed on the facts.
I would echo that. What I would say is that if you, and I will call out a couple of stations, but because I think it's important to navigate to where we are now, right? So I think most Americans, they want to get information. They're going to go to their large news articles, whether that's media, whether that's print. They're going to go to the Times, the Atlantic, CNN, Fox, MSNBC. Let's say that you feel like you're leaning a particular way. The next step is organizations like the Young Turks, right? They're very, very liberal. They know their target audience and they do it well. But that doesn't exist for Black people. Mm-hmm. Now it does, but it didn't historically. Because when I look at every single one of the stations or articles or media sources that I mentioned to you, I don't see people like me writing it. I don't see people like me reporting on it. And it's not only about seeing Black people. I don't see someone who's 28 doing it. I don't see someone who's 26 doing it. Yeah. And so that's also problematic because it's not only a dichotomy in terms of race, but also in terms of age. We have to understand that these media outlets are really dominated by the baby boomer generation. And that's okay. They've done their thing. And up until recently, they were the largest voting bloc. And that's changing very, very quickly now. And so it's not only about a racial disparity, but also an age gap. I think a lot of, even if we speak to our parents, they have different memories than us. They remember a Joe Biden and a Donald Trump in a different way than we remember them. Our lifetime experiences are different. Right. And that enables us to cast the type of decisions that we want to cast. And we can't be ignorant to the fact that, and my little sister, who's 23, has a totally different vantage point than either myself or my mom. And so these age gaps and these racial gaps actually form to combine. And I think it really opened a hole for where politicking is now filling, because it's not only important that someone looks like you, but someone is in the same, state of mind as you. And I think that's what we're bringing that's extremely unique to this political conversation.
I love that. Now let's get to another question. We have Woke Vote Southeast. How do you believe the racial tension in America will impact the election?
I think it's already impacted it, right? In fact, Black Lives Matter, as the New York Times reported, is the largest U.S. movement in history. So that means within the life of this country, that's the largest movement that we've ever been a part of and experienced. And I think that's translated directly to the polls. Obviously, Black Lives Matter is a Generation Z and millennial-led movement, and 6.6 more Generation Z and millennial voters have showed up thus far. So when we say young people are a growing part of the landscape, that's not just made up for our own benefit. That's the truth. And so I think that it also leads candidates to become more accountable. 4 years ago, Black Lives Matter was a hashtag to many, or really a polarizing point to a lot. Now we got Mitt Romney, a Republican white senator, saying that he's a part of the movement, making himself a part of the marches, and really even working to support legislation that at least, and maybe to some people not enough, but at least speaks to the idea that Black lives do matter on the ballot. And so I think that it impacts, of course, the accountability part, but also a perception. For so long, America has had this perception issue as it pertains to police killings and as it pertains to government accountability. But I will tell you, defund the police obviously means something if cities like San Francisco and Chicago and so many even states are actually trying to put into their budgets and into their infrastructures a way to ensure that police aren't getting so much of the budget, to make sure that they aren't just guarding the streets with guns and officers, to really think, what are we doing to ensure that people are safe, and to ensure that, a 911 call doesn't translate into somebody being murdered when that didn't have to happen. I think governments are taking that seriously, and they know, I would say, especially even our presidential candidates, if they don't articulate policies that show that, they don't have a chance in getting elected or reelected.
For me, I think, like Jordan said, Black lives are on the ballot. We're seeing that. Never have we seen in debates people ask questions about the state of the African-American community. And I still think it's too short, because 2 minutes is not going to do my life experience justice. It's wrong. But at least they're starting to have the conversation. And I actually want to bring in the next demographic, because we always say it's Black and brown voters. I cannot leave without speaking about the Latinx community. 1/3 of eligible voters are going to be non-white this year.
Yeah.
That is waking some people up. Okay. And it's not only just us, it's the Hispanic population as well. And people are being forced to pay attention. 15 million of Latinx voters are unregistered, and 60% of that community is under the age of 23. It's time to pay attention. If you cannot snare the Black and Latinx vote, you aren't winning anything in this country. Yeah. So now our issues are being pushed to the forefront, and it's time for us to actualize on our political capital. I think we have to continue to make sure that Black lives matter after the election. And again, it's all about that accountability. I don't know if you guys saw our good sis go off on the Shade Room the other day when she was reading the police board members. But I need to see more of that. That is young activism. We need to see more of that in our communities, because we're sitting here, we talk about voting. There's other ways to actualize your political capital. And what that young lady did, I think she deserves a Nobel Peace Prize, but also what she did is actualize her political capital. And there's more than one way to skin a cat. We do need to be present at those board meetings. we do need to be sitting in the room. We do need to be petitioning. It's not only about voting. It's bigger than that. We have to do these things in tandem.
Yeah.
Voting is the start. I want people to know that we're advocates for voting. We want everyone to exercise their right if they have it. But voting is the start. This is not the end all be all. When we talk about representing Black lives and providing resources that ensure, the safety and livelihood of all of us, those are the bare minimum things that candidates that can do. But voting is literally the bare minimum that we can do.
How do you feel about, well, before I even get into that, I want to piggyback off of what you guys were saying about our voices right now. I think a lot of people are saying that the white people are very, they're speaking up, they're loud, they're showing that they're racist. They're not scared anymore to hide it. But I think we're speaking up and we're letting people know we're not afraid to let our voices be heard at this point. And I think social media, if you can agree or disagree, that social media has heightened that platform for us, because now we're able to show it. Now we're able to stand up and make these killings visible to the world and let them see what's happening and what's going on, to let them know that racial injustice is real, that it's actually happening, that it's relevant in the world right now. So moving on, how do you guys feel about the importance of local voting and local opportunities than looking at the presidential election? The local elections, the presidential election, let's talk about both of those. How important or unimportant do you feel about that?
I feel extremely important about it.
Sorry,
the issues that impact our day-to-day lives don't start and end at Pennsylvania Avenue. 1600 Pennsylvania, of course, gives the president an opportunity to authorize and in some instances veto legislation that has a lot to do with state and local issues. But our mayors, our governors, our county commissioners, our state legislators are the only people that are tasked with figuring out local and state issues on a day-to-day. In fact, I can't even call Donald Trump tomorrow or Kamala Harris. I know she's blown up as a vice presidential candidate. I can't call Joe Biden tomorrow. And, God willing, as politicking becomes more prominent, maybe we'll be able to engage more directly with these folks. But I can't call my mayor. And if I can't call him, I can get in touch with precinct folks, council members, and I can tell them I don't like what I see. And when I get to the polls on Tuesday, I'll remember what I haven't seen from you based on what you told me. I also have an opportunity, if I'm not putting my foot on their necks, to just get to know them. What are they about? I'll get an opportunity to spend some time with them and create allyship that's genuine and engaged. I don't have that opportunity with the president or a senator, or even in some instances a congressman, and that's okay, because we can't depend on folks who are maybe tasked with going in and out of Washington, or who are so focused on Washington, to understand what's happening on the streets all the time. Our system of government is set up so that we can pay attention to our Congress folks, or at the state level, our legislators, because those are our neighbors. They are directly representative of us because they are us. And so I think it's extremely important to participate in state and local levels for that very reason.
We emphasize politics with the lowercase p. And so micro politics or smaller elections are extremely important to us. And we actually don't even look at them as smaller or micro. We look at them as macro, because we know that who's mitigating policy in your backyard, who's figuring out where your kids go to school, who's filling potholes in your community. That's the stuff that's affecting you on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
And, Brianna, when we pitch, our opening statement is often, do you know who your mayor is? How about your superintendent? Tell me their names, because if you can't tell me their names, then there's no way you can hold them accountable.
Yeah.
And people often are like in this deafening bubble of silence, and we don't do it to embarrass people. This is what we need. We want to show the investors that there's a need for this.
Yeah.
There's a real need. If you don't know the name of the people that are legislating on your behalf, that's a fundamental issue. And they've done a great job at keeping people that look like us in the dark about those things. But guess what? When I ask some of my peers that don't look like me, they rattle them off, and they have good relationships with them. And I always tell people this example. If your community is 85% Black, but they know that the 15% of the Jews in the community are the ones that vote, guess who's going to get the playground built on their side of the community? Exactly. And it has nothing to do with race. It has something to do with who's at the ballot. If you're not showing up, your issues are at the bottom of the agenda. Yeah. And so I would say that to any community, this is the way that you have to actualize your political capital. If you're not speaking up, nobody's paying attention to you. It doesn't matter if you are 85% of the community. If your 85% doesn't vote, you're as good as zero.
Yeah, I actually watched some of those videos. Very funny on you guys when you ask people the questions. Very funny. Back to our question.
Not all of them thought that.
I bet some of them were like really shook. Like, I really do not know. All right, let's see. Noelle, if there was an agenda you would want the new elected official to address, what would it be and why?
I would say, and I mentioned this, that tech is really the equalizer of our century. A couple of years or even decades ago, it was education. But I think even to that point, tech goes hand in hand with education, and with opportunity. And as we mentioned, COVID recovery is big for us. I don't know if you guys noticed, but once we realized that, Blacks were being disproportionately impacted and brown folks were being disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, I don't know if you guys noticed, everything started opening around then. Could you have imagined if it was found out that impacted everyone? You think we would have been able to just pop back into the club so soon, or head back into some of the non-necessary places that we've been hanging out, myself included? I doubt it. So another thing that I think is very important and an issue that's really prominent is us ensuring that we're taken care of in a pandemic. And so healthcare is a big deal. I think people, and this is why politicking is so important, hear a lot about Medicaid for all and a bunch of other plans and try to really figure out why that's relevant. I'll tell you why. You really shouldn't have to work to get taken care of. But unfortunately, in this country, that's how it is. Not everybody has a chance to go to law school or go to college, but it seems like that's the only way you can get healthcare also if you're in school. And so these are some basic day-to-day things that, I'm really concerned about as this election is passing over and as we move into the state and local cycles.
Wen-kuni, did you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I want to reimagine the carceral system in this country. I think it looks crazy, particularly from the vantage point of having lived in other countries. I mean, the United States is the industrialized country with the most people incarcerated. And that number is polarizing, but what's more polarizing is the demographic makeup of those people. And again, we know who those people are. There are our uncles and our brothers, and our aunts sometimes, and our mothers. And oftentimes they're people that might need mental health treatment or drug treatment, but certainly don't deserve to be thrown away. And oftentimes people are thrown away into that abyss and of our criminal justice system and left alone and locked away and come out more damaged than they entered. And I thought it was supposed to be a rehabilitation, and it's not. Mm-hmm. And I want us to reimagine that. I want us to reimagine our education system. I feel bad that the fact that schools are opening back up and teachers are having to put their lives at jeopardy to teach our children. We have to find a better way to do this. And why have other countries, whether it be in Asia or Europe, been able to eradicate the disease and we have not? Yeah. We have to say that it's due to poor leadership. And we have to look for ways to be able to really extricate this virus, because other countries have been able to get it under control. Yeah. I don't want us to walk around thinking that it's just impossible to beat. No. We saw what happened in Italy. We saw what happened in China, and they were able to stamp it out, and we haven't. And I have to attribute some of that to our leadership. And so when we do look, to what things are important to us, what's important on my agenda, it's someone who's going to, help us to get past this COVID-19 pandemic. It's, the education system, the carceral system. I'm someone that really is for the future and what the future is going to look like for generations to come. I'm not only thinking about what the world is like for Wen-kuni, Jordan, and Brianna, but the generations to come behind us, our little ones, our families. That's what's important to me, because we have to make the world better. And speaking of that, the environment, oh my goodness. You know, one of the craziest things that was done in the last 4 years was the withdrawal from the Paris climate agreement. That was a disappointment, not only to me as an American, but a disappointment on behalf of the entire global community. The United States is supposed to be a leader. We're not leading anymore. We're leading in carbon fuel emissions. That's what we're leading in. And we have to find someone or find an agenda that pushes that forward. This is something by 2050, we might be underwater if we don't pay attention to. We really have to look alive here. And so those are the types of things that I'm extremely passionate about. And I want to see that change. And whoever's about that change, that's who I'm with. Whoever's about that change.
Yes, yes. So getting back into politicking, what are some things you want to share that you've done in this past 4 years and where you want to see yourself in the next 4 years when it comes to the Politicking app?
Yeah, so the past 4 years, I think we've laid the groundwork and started a lot of the actual efforts towards being that constantly sought out and utilized tool for political information. And that's, of course, about as broad as it gets. But for us, looking back to the inception of the app and then looking on to when we actually got things formalized and going, that was our goal. We just wanted people to look at politicking when they had a question, when they heard somebody on Facebook saying something crazy. I got family, I got uncles and aunts that send me information. Did you know the president did this? I'm like, he did not. Or, even Joe Biden, I'm like, look on the app, because we have some points for you to kind of read through things and research. But moving ahead, we talked about this a lot, but I don't think we can overemphasize it. We'll become that same tool and equally as reference for accountability. When it comes to really figuring out what candidates are doing, sometimes they count on voters having selective memory. So they'll remind you about what they want you to recall, but they also sometimes want you not to remember some of the more unfortunate things or some of, the less favorable things about their tenure. And that's not anything that we support. We want people to remember everything. We want people to have the facts. I think we also want people to have a tool that they can contribute to. So we're constantly building out features across all of our platforms. So on the web, of course, on our app and on Instagram and Twitter, to ensure that they can provide their own content. We want politicking to become more of a political information ecosystem so that, we don't have to lean on, again, other sources to provide us information. We can create that on our own, so long as we have algorithms and systems and methods in place to ensure that this info is nonpartisan, non-biased, and completely legit. I think we're well on our way to doing that.
Yes.
Brianna, I'll let you in on a secret that a lot of people probably haven't noticed. So one of Jordan and I's biggest accomplishments this year was we changed Politicking's handle on Instagram from Politicking app to Politicking. Okay, the reason for the significance behind that is that Politicking in the last 4 years has grown from an app to a multimedia platform, to an ecosystem, like Jordan mentioned. That is so fundamentally important, because we want people to understand we're not just an app. We're going to give it to you on TV. We're going to give it to you on a YouTube channel. We're going to give it to you on Instagram, Twitter. Wherever you eat, that's where we're at. You know what I mean? If you need a 30-second video, here, we have something for you. If you need a 40-minute series, here, we have something for you. If you need an infographic, we have that too. We're meeting people where they're at, because one thing that's alienated our demographic so much is voter literacy. A lot of us, that complicated legalese jargon. Even if you have had the opportunity to go to college, and we know that that's not everybody in our demographic. We don't understand. Should I vote yes? Should I vote no? We want to cast that aside. We want to make for an opportunity where every single person goes into a polling precinct and feels confident on the way out, knowing that I voted for someone that truly aligns with my interests, or I voted for an amendment or referendum that truly aligns with my interests. And the other thing is, and I say this from a very humble place, I want young Black women to be able to look at Jordan and I and be like, wow, there are Black women in tech. Yeah. And that's cool. You know what I mean? We're not like weird, you know what I mean? We're normal people. Yeah. I want them to see that, because it's not seen. If you would ask me, who I'm looking for, I don't know who to even look at. There's a couple of ladies that have been doing tremendous jobs, but in the civic tech space, it's just us.
Not only tech, politics.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's what Wen-kuni was saying in civic tech. There's your Axios, there's your Politico, there's your 538. Shout out to them. Perhaps there are partnerships along the way, but those are the frat houses for political and civic tech entities. We're the only one that represents our particular demographic.
Yes. Yes. If you haven't already swiped out of YouTube and followed them and then came back, you need to go do it now,
Yeah.
because I'm telling you,
Can we
politicking.
tell them? Yeah, can we tell them where to
Yes.
get LinkedIn? So
Yes.
for both for Twitter and both our website, it's
Yes, please.
Politicking app. Yep. So the website is politickingapp.com. For Twitter, it's the same. But as Wen-kuni mentioned, on Instagram, we're actually just politicking. I think that's a great reminder to let people know that we're in a cross-platform entity, you know, so we're available on Instagram, we're available on Twitter, and then we're also available on Facebook at Politicking the app. One thing I have wanted to add to both you and Wen-kuni's points is that, but really you, Brianna, you mentioned earlier that you weren't educated enough to have made those decisions. And I think that's somewhat of a mindset we have to recognize. Folks who don't look like us impose that. Being involved, walking into the election, knowing everybody on the ballot, that is not a measure of intelligence. It's really not. In fact, you know, there are plenty of people, I even have some local leaders who didn't even graduate high school, but who are well into office. And, so, and what I mean is that being a civic participant, showing up at the polls, or just showing up in general does not correlate to the amount of education you have. I think it really correlates to what you're able to access. And so we're ensuring that those barriers to access the information don't exist.
Amazing. Let's get back to some questions we have here. Who is this? This is Noel. Noel says, how do you think the misconception that individuals with criminal records can't vote has affected past elections?
You know, I think that it's impacted formerly convicted felons directly. Actually, I was canvassing with my family and we were talking to guys that were saying that they didn't have the right. I'm like, in our state, you don't just have to have a bright line rule. And I think that a lot of formerly convicted felons, family members of formerly convicted felons, spouses, whoever, they don't have the information to let them know that. And that turns out to millions of people being absent in the next election. When we have to understand what that fight looks like also. An Atlanta-based Supreme or appellate court made a decision for Florida voters to essentially have to pay a poll tax. These are formerly convicted felons within the state. Hopefully this case will go on to the Supreme Court and folks will challenge that bullshit ruling. But I think that understanding what the actual fight for the rights of formerly incarcerated folks looks like will help us to ensure and demystify what their rights are currently. And so in addition to research, I think keeping up with the fight and the struggle for their rights is something that's really important to breaking through on that perception.
I want to elaborate on that. That's, you know, Brianna, we're from Florida. Amendment 4 was the big thing on the ballot in 2018. It was the hot topic and it was passed. But like Jordan said, our democracy is constantly being challenged, right? And that poll tax she's referring to is especially, they're making you pay off all of your court fees before you can vote. And for some people, that's a lot. And you have to understand, as a formerly convicted
most
felon,
people, that's a lot.
Yeah.
To most people, that's a lot.
That's why they do it. So
For me,
they
that
know.
would be a lot.
Exactly.
And it's hard to find work if you're formerly incarcerated. And so it's the systematic cycle of oppression that you're getting stopped in your tracks everywhere that you're trying to go. So we have to make sure we're staying on top of these issues. I'm of the fundamental belief that if you served your time, you should be bestowed all the rights that were stripped upon you entering jail. You know what I mean? If we're really supposed to be a restorative community, then we have to give people their rights back, because you're subjecting people to a system, but without having their rights to vote. You know what that sounds like to me? Slavery. That's exactly what they did during slave times. The 3/5 Amendment, all of these things where you're not quite human enough to vote, but you're human enough to toil the land. that kind of rhetoric is dangerous, you know what I mean? And it reminds me of, you know, the slavocracy of America. And so that's really, really disconcerting. We have to continue to push back against that. We in every single state, because some states are good, like California, they don't play that funny stuff. Florida, you know, where we gets it popping, it's a little different.
Yeah, a little different.
And that's a state's right. And that's another reason why you have to use resources like Politicking. Go look up your state and see where they stand on, you know, felony restoration rights, etc., because it's a statewide issue.
So we have another question. It was one that I was just about to get to. I think it was, nope, not that one. I'm sorry, y'all. It was right on my screen. It has scrolled down. I believe it was something around the lines of here we go. Shanae, what do you think is the most important feature on the app?
What's up, Shanae?
What's up, Shanae?
I think for me, my favorite feature on the app is electorate, because that's what is showing me every single person that's going to appear on my ballot and the people that are contesting them. To me, that's super, super important, because I want to know every single name. And, you know, I might not remember every single name, but at least I've given it a look. At least I've looked over their policies. At least I can see, okay, they went to school here. This is their focus. You know, they have a criminal justice background. You know, maybe they were a prosecutor prior, or maybe they were a public defender. Those are the types of things that frame our decision making. And in the past, prior to devices like Politicking, you really would make your decision based off of name recognition. Research shows that. Whether you've known someone's name for something good or bad, the mind doesn't actually differentiate. You're just like, I saw their name before. That's dangerous. So we got to make sure we're seeing their names for the right reasons. And electorate is the particular feature that I suggest everyone get on and use. That's my favorite feature, Shanae.
Yeah, Shanae, electorate is super important. It also gives you an idea to assess and really walk into the ballot with a comparative mindset. As I mentioned, I'm more so interested in what the issues are and less about who the person is, because the yard signs and commercials don't tell me anything. I need to know about what their actual policy plans are. Another and related feature that we have is the 411, which is much better, I would say, than logging on to Twitter and looking at the hashtags, because if we were to even remember like the DNC hashtags, one might talk about AOC's white suit, one might talk about Kamala Harris doing Mary J. Blige dances, one might talk about Joe Biden falling asleep or doing whatever he does, bless his heart, and then a couple might talk about substantive policy proposals and the issues, but the 411 aggregates hashtags or what's happening in the internet sphere, so to speak, based on nonpartisan articles. So it's more so of an educational asset. And I think it's something that will allow us, again, to my point, to educate people, to really increase civic literacy. It's not going to school. It's not sitting down in a political science class. It's just knowing the facts and not getting so caught in and distracted by chatter, right? I mean, I love trolling as much as the next person, and perhaps even Politicking will become more of a place to embrace that. But that does not do anything opposed. If I remember Kamala Harris's Mary J. Blige soundtrack, I won't be able to focus on what she said about incarceration or some of the alternative sentencing measures she's had, like cash bail reform, things like that. And so the 411 feature is what will really allow voters to keep these things in mind, of course, in 2020 on November, but really after that too.
So let's talk about some of the other features on the app. What are some of the other features that we can discuss that's also on the app?
Let me tell you,
I would say another one is the polling by location feature. I was voting with someone in the primaries and I couldn't figure out where she was. She's like, I was at the wrong place. I was like, this is why we have the app. You know, the polling by location feature is actually GPS oriented based on your location. So if you're in Michigan right now or Philly, in my hometown, I'm still registered to vote in Indiana. I can figure out where I need to go just based off putting that address in. On top of that, I can actually figure out what certain dates are, which is important. I want to remind everybody really quick that now is a good time to drop off your early ballot. If you already haven't mailed it, don't deal with the drama that UPS might subject us to. But The polling by location feature allows us to figure out where we need to go, and really keeps us from being so confused and having our time wasted on election day, because as much as we recognize that it's important to vote, people have jobs and things to do. And so polling by location feature is what people should lean on to just get straight to the point.
Yeah. Lastly, I would say the info section is great. That's what I was going to say. I send my little sisters there because seriously, I'm concerned. I'm like, y'all know what the legislative branch is? They're like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, okay, go to the info section, find out what the three branches of government do, find out the difference between the Electoral College and the popular vote. Go ahead and take a look at, prior to where we are now, there was 20 people running for president. It was a circus. We had
there were more than 20.
It was really a lot.
They were close to 30 at a certain point.
It was ridiculous. I mean, everybody that had American passport was running for president. So at this point, we had a feature that actually was following this, and we had them categorized based on some of their political experience, etc. We had, I think, the heavyweights, the Cinderella story. And it was so interesting because you could follow them and you can kind of see them, drop out as well as we narrowed it down. So I thought that feature was really cool. We have a voter checklist that tells you like, hey, have you recently moved? Did you get your address changed? Make sure your signature matches. We have something that tells you the valid form of voter ID to bring because, voter ID laws, people that look like us are often the ones that are subjected to them. So yeah, you need to know that you could bring your license or your passport, but you could also bring, your student ID card, and that's okay too. And you have to know all the license and IDs that you can bring because oftentimes they might tell you, oh, you can't vote with that. Yes, I can, So you have to make sure that you know your rights. You have to know in certain places you can cast a provisional ballot, even if you don't have an ID at all, Do not let anyone mute your voice this November.
Yeah, and I was actually going to say in most places you should be able to, or you should be calling the election hotline, which is on that voting checklist that Wen-kuni is talking about. In most places you should be able to show up and say, I don't have my ID, I can't see today, I don't know anything. And they should be able to allow you to cast a provisional ballot, and then you check with your county and or state about what the status of that ballot is. But please, that would be a red flag if you walk into a polling location anywhere and they tell you that you can't do that.
And we have a place for you to report them if they do. Yep. So holla at us.
Politicking, I'm telling you.
Don't DM us. Go on the app. I ain't got my JD yet, so go on the app.
Go on the app. Let's get back to more questions. So we have Brianna Patterson. Some celebrities have used their platforms to discuss the current events. How do you feel like this has helped or will impact this election and future elections?
I'm so glad Brianna brought that up, to be honest, because one of the things that we do on Politicking is we feature celebrities, or we like to call them cultural mavens, to be honest. A lot of people have used their platforms for good, but we've also seen a lot of people using their platforms and they don't really have the right information themselves. And I think it's really important that we're hesitant to subscribe to the cancel culture that we've seen. I think oftentimes you see someone say one thing you disagree with, they're canceled. But how does that allow us the opportunity to learn from one another?
Right.
Let's take the Ice Cube situation, for example. You may or may not have liked what he said, and that's fine. And my issue wasn't necessarily with what he said, but the time in which he said it. A lot of people said, hey, where have you been the last 20 years? Why haven't you spoken up? But what it teaches us is that you're never too late to learn. You're never too late to make a mistake. And you're never too late to atone for your mistakes. And oftentimes we have to allow, especially people in our community, to have the grace to, you might have messed up, you fell, but try to use your powers for good and not evil. Diddy had to do that. He had to do that because he was saying at first, hold the vote hostage. Then he got back and talked to Charlemagne. I don't know who got
your vote hostage.
I can guess who got them together, but somebody got them together, and he was like, no, we're gonna vote. We're gonna just go. And I was like, whoever spoke to him, good job. Because, a lot of times you have that platform, you're Diddy, a lot of people are listening to you. And so now they're like, well, I'm not voting either. Sweetie, you're not a billionaire. You don't have the luxury. So we needed to get ourselves to the ballot. And I'm glad he came back and circled back. and allowing space for celebrities to circle back, because they're people too, and they make mistakes.
Yeah. And I think culture. Oh, go ahead, Jordan.
Well, I was just saying the best thing about celebrities getting involved in politics is for us to recognize how common they are.
Yep.
And how much they don't know, or how much they're just like the very people, ourselves included, that we're trying to help and impact the election. To the Ice Cube point, I think it could never be clearer how much he doesn't know. I don't think his desire to impact or make a positive change or a difference is questioned. I think what's really questionable is his research. And that's not a shot, that's just the facts. So I think the same goes with Cardi B and all of the joy with some of her interviews. You know, she's vulnerable about what she needs to learn, and that's how we need to be. I mean, that's the only way our platform can be effective.
And that's what I was going to say too. You touched right on it. Literally, it's being able to have them say something. They have such a following. So being able to hear their opinions and then being vulnerable and honest about it. Now, I will say, us as a culture, we got to stop canceling people so fast, y'all. Somebody thinks you're wrong. They say the wrong word. They say one thing and it's like, oh, cancel. We done with that person. It's like, they're still human. They are natural people. We all make one mistake and say the wrong word in our real life. Do we get canceled? No. So we have to stop canceling people off of one mistake.
I agree.
I want a little bit of grace, so I extend grace because I want grace. So I'm not perfect either. I might say something crazy tomorrow, and y'all need to forgive me, please.
Exactly. So
one of our I was just gonna say, one of our interviewees the other day said this about Congress, but I think that this is indicative of politics. We have too many perfect people showing up to vote, running for Congress and running for office. I'm not one of them. I can speak for Wen-kuni. She's not in. That's not who we're interested in working with.
Yes. So let's get into, we have one last question. Let's see. Can you speak on the recent killing of Walter Wallace and how you feel this will have a change within Philly and the country's politically?
Well, I'm in Philly right now. Shout out to Philly. I went to Drexel University, so I feel very close to the city. I feel very akin to the city. What happened to Walter Williams was a tragedy, and I think that goes without saying. What we need to understand is that what we saw here was someone who had a mental health issue. I believe he was autistic. I believe that he was outside with his mother. You know, this is the type of stuff we have to stop. You know what I mean? If someone is having a mental health crisis or breakdown, they need to be sent to the hospital. Not to anywhere else, but to the hospital, not to prison, and certainly not taken out of the world. We have to stop normalizing this trauma porn that I think that we've seen run rampant, and not only in 2020, but it's been happening for years. It's been happening since the advent of cellular phones or video cameras. I mean, since Rodney King. You know, what we're seeing is really no different. And it's a failure on the system, and we have to reimagine the way the system works. It's clearly broken. And we're seeing death after death after death of Black men and women at the hands of the police. So at this point, we need to find a solution. And whether that solution be to defund the police and defund the carceral system in totality, we need to start considering alternatives, because one life lost is too many, let alone the countless names that we've lost just in the year 2020. We have to stop it. And the Philly PD, I've been watching the Free Meek documentary. I know I'm about a year late, so y'all don't charge it to my heart, my head and not my heart. That documentary, it speaks about the Philadelphia Police Department. And there have been injustices there, you know, for years. And you're going to see that in any urban metropolis.
Yeah.
And we have to continue to pay attention to them, hold them accountable. You know, I'm here. I don't know if we're on curfew tonight or what, but I want people to remember that marching is the first step. Hand in hand, you need to vote. Hand in hand, you need to show up to the police board meetings. Hand in hand, you need to petition. You need to lobby. Make sure that we're not being reactive. We need to be proactive. Let's make sure that we fix the policy before we have another death on our hands. And that's what I would encourage people to do. And vote people out that aren't making a difference.
Yes.
But my hope is that people step back and really think through the idea of reforming the police system. Fundamentally, that word means to reform, continue, or further something that's already started that clearly doesn't work. That was not the first incident of the Philadelphia police killing an unarmed Black man, and that wasn't the first time that they've killed an unarmed, disabled Black man. So if this continues to happen, people have to really step back and ask, why would we even consider and cater to the idea of keeping something institutionalized that doesn't work for people? Let's go to the polls Tuesday. I know I am, and think about doing something different. Let's reimagine this system. I don't know why people are scared of talking about defunding the police. In many cities and in most places, that doesn't mean that we'll wake up after the election and not have a police force. It means that we won't have to worry about this happening. We won't have to deal with another Walter Wallace. We won't have to deal with another George Floyd. I'm tired of that. And so I think that people should really research and take the idea of defunding the police more seriously. I think that they should be cautious of candidates who keep saying that they don't want to defund the police, because if that's, and I'm not calling on names, a candidate's first line towards that conversation, that should tell you that a candidate is not thinking creatively and genuinely about what will work for people. The Philadelphia police in that particular incident failed the people of the city. They failed Walter. And I think that will continue to happen if we're not serious about doing away with this system that's just dysfunctional and ineffective.
Yes. Now, I know I said that was my last question, but I think I'm going to take these last two and give it to each of you. Each of you take one, and then we'll wrap it up for tonight. So there's one, whoever wants to take this one. How can we get college students more involved in local elections, especially for students in a new area who aren't educated in that area? And then the other one, if someone wants to take that one, what do you think is the most, oh no, we did that one. What do you think the political arena is missing right now? Better candidates, more people participating in the system, abolishing the current system.
Wow, both of those are great questions.
I know, that's why I'm like, I had to get both of these questions in here.
I will say that the political system is missing people who are inspired. People don't have a why. I don't know why people think, and I mean, I think disenfranchisement is a large part, so I can't say I don't know why, but we all been in the Cheesecake Factory. How many things you see on a menu that you don't like? You just flip the next page. You understand that you have choices. If people don't actually get that when it comes to voting, and they don't see that sort of hopefulness or even see what's to gain out of an election, they'll stop feeling good about it. They'll stop seeing the value in showing up, and they'll become apathetic. That's where we're meeting people. So I think that when it comes to having an informed citizenry, it's important that we help people understand. That doesn't mean that, again, we're having people roll off these political facts. That means we see people who are more inspired, who are even maybe willing to run for office, who never have before, who don't have that $100 or $1 million donor base on their Rolodex, but who understand that if they have a vision for change or to do something for people, that they should run. And so I think that that's really what's missing, not only from our electorate, but from candidates. I also think that representation is something that's lacking. It's great to have a Black woman running for vice president, but I do not have people that I identify with ideologically, meaning who care about the issues I do at levels of government, right? Like, we all ganging on Kamala Harris, and she's in DC. She don't have nothing to do with what's going on locally. Yeah. I mean, really, she was never my district attorney. She was never my attorney general. What does that have to do with anything? I mean, after a certain point, we have to get serious about caring about those folks who are in our jurisdiction. So I think really that level of attentiveness and inspiration about what's happening in our community around us is lacking. And maybe there's just a dissonance with people understanding how that translates to the ballot. And so politicking will fulfill that void.
Yes. I'm gonna take the college question. As we conclude, I would be remiss not to thank Dre Martin for putting this together. And as we talk about college students, we have to talk about HBCU Unite, because historically Black colleges and universities and the students of those institutions are the lifeblood of organizations like Politicking, right? So I think we have to say that first. aside from that, there's so many things that at politicking and outside of politicking we want to do with college students, because we know that this age group is the most energetic when it comes to politics. They're excited, they're galvanized, they're revolutionaries. You know, I feel like maybe 8 years ago, I was a little more revolutionary. Because what happens is you get sluggish, you get slow, you get settled in your ways, you might make a little money. But when you're young and fervent and are learning, you know, your mind is a pearl and you're a catalyst for change. And we have to continue to put those students on the forefront, on the precipice of what we're seeing right now in politics. And with politicking, that's what we focus on. We believe that you're not too young to get involved. The youngest team member at politicking is 17 years old. And when I tell you he's a leader, you know, he is championing causes in his own community every single day. And that's what I want to see for the future. And so we have college ambassador programs, and, you know, we had so many plans for 2020. We wanted to do speaking tours. And so we've been able to do some of those limited, you know, online, but I can't wait until it's safe to be outside again, because we want to hit homecomings. We want this conversation to be one, not just every 4 years, but every single homecoming, every single, you know, political debate that they may have on a college campus. I want to see political debates being held at HBCUs. You know, yes. I want conversations to be coalescing with the institutions that brought us up. You know, we are the progeny of these historically Black colleges and universities. So I'm proud to be a Howard University alumna, and I know Jordan is as well. And I know you're proud to be a Rattler, and
there's hardly a time people don't hear about it.
You know, like we have to continue to uplift that, and we're doing that at politicking, and I hope that people outside of the arena are doing that as well. But we have to continue to show that college students are the lifeblood of the political revolution, and they will continue to be as long as we continue to uplift them.
Yes, I mean, this was an amazing conversation, ladies. Politicking is more than just an app. You know, you guys have built something that is going to be lifelong, life-driven. Like, it's an amazing platform for us to use and just have insight and knowledge on everything that's going on as far as politics. And just like you said, with women being in tech and everything. I want to thank everybody from being, somebody said HU. Okay, Dre. I want to thank all of you guys for tuning in. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. We definitely want to thank HBCU Unite for putting this together and bridging this gap, because this was a conversation that we all needed to hear. The comments have been, let's see, we got Grambling State in the building. Shout out to Grambling State.
Shout out Grambling.
Any other HBCUs, go ahead and put it in the chat. Let's go ahead and shout you out. We got to do FAMU one more time. FAMU is here, but no, again, we want to thank you guys so much for joining this conversation, being a part of it. If you haven't already, make sure you go and follow Politicking, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. Like they said, you can also HBCU Unite, you'll see them tagged on there, as well as myself, if you want to keep up to date with me and what I'm doing. But again,
shout out to you, Brianna. Shout out to you. You're just
Brianna, can I say one
everything?
Thank you.
You're embodying everything young millennial women should really be thinking about and looking towards. So shout out to you.
Thank you so much.
Y'all follow Brianna Harmon. She's doing her thing. The last place I wanted to say that we didn't mention, y'all, if y'all like what y'all heard, if y'all want to support, I say we love a round of applause, but we also love a round of funding. Check out our GoFundMe. The link is in our Politicking bio on Instagram, on Twitter. You know, you guys can donate to us because we are a grassroots cause and we're trying to further this. And what we do is for the people, but we need y'all's help. So make sure you donate to our GoFundMe. You can find it on GoFundMe. Look up Politicking 2020 and you'll be able to donate, whether it's $5 or $500. Make some noise in there.
$1 can help us pay somebody for what they're doing or what they're helping us with, and of course helps us with our own efforts. So $1, please.
Not only that, sharing it. It takes $0.99 to $0.00999, but it takes $0 to share and just get the app out there. Make people aware of what's happening. Make people aware of the conversation. It's for us, people. It's for us. So again,
buy
us, for us, everything. So again, thank you guys so much for tonight, and follow us, stay tuned, stay connected. I want to see you guys at the polls, no matter where you are. Go and vote, let your voice be heard. So I want to thank you again on behalf of Jordan, on behalf of Wen-kuni. We say good night.
Thanks, Brianna.
Thanks, guys, for having us. Shall we just hang up?